Hey guys, Levi from the future. I just want to take a quick second and apologize to you guys for all the issues I've been having with my audio quality. It took me trying out 3 different setups before I finally found one that's working good. Now, unfortunately, I'd already started filming this video, so just be patient. About 10 minutes in, the new stuff takes over and it is a whole lot better. So please enjoy the rest of the video and I'll catch you guys later.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back. I hope everybody had a good Christmas. I know I did, spent some time with some family, but now I'm back to some priorities. First of which is making this right. So to those who watched my last video, you know what I'm talking about. To those who didn't, I'll just fill you in real quick. What started out as just a normal routine, will it start, see if we can get this thing up and working again, quickly turned into completely rewiring this thing, ripping all the old wiring out of it. That turned into us discovering a pretty bad issue with the engine. Uh-oh. Fire, we got fire.
Yeah, that would be the crankshaft we're looking at right there, guys. Where the hell is the connecting rod and the piston?
After using my borescope, I discovered that somebody at some point turned this 2-cylinder Onan into a single cylinder. I had quite a few comments saying, "Oh, Levi, you must be mistaken. You probably got it confused with another one. There's no way that thing ran." Guys, I promise you, I go through a lot of these things, but I'm telling you, this thing fired up in the dude's yard and I drove it on my trailer on 1 cylinder. Now, the way I ended that video, it just didn't sit quite right with me. I always try to see these projects through. And since then, I have come up with a plan. Let me just show you what that plan is. Now, what you guys are looking at here is yet another P216 Onan engine. I did talk about this briefly in the last video. It was actually a very similar situation where I went and bought a tractor. It started up and ran on my trailer, and that was the only time I could get it to run. And come to find out, this thing had a broke rod. Now, this was back before I was making videos. I actually took that tractor, took this engine off. So this thing's been sitting in my barn for about a year and a half, 2 years now. I've robbed a few other parts off of it, but that's pretty much been its purpose. It's just been collecting dust. Now, sadly, the connecting rod that broke on this engine is the same cylinder that this one is missing. Well, with all my time off during the holidays, I started looking up some parts diagrams. Come to find out, they use the exact same connecting rod and piston on both cylinders. So that means potentially we have got a donor right here. So that's the plan. We are going to rob some good parts out of this thing. I also bought a $12 gasket set. Figured we'd go ahead and decarbon the heads and stuff like that. Now I know what you're thinking. Levi, that's a whole lot of work you're putting into this 30-year-old tractor that looks like crap. And you're not wrong. But I'm laid off right now. It's winter, and I got nothing better to do. So let's dig in. Now, before I go ripping parts out of that old engine, I don't want to waste a whole lot of time for no reason. So I think the smart thing to do would be to pull this engine, get the shrouding ripped off, go ahead and pull the heads, and take a good look at the valves, because even though we know we've got an issue with the back cylinder, these things are also known for dropping valve seats. And if this thing dropped a valve seat, it's pretty much game over, and you guys will never see this video. So we're going to start with ripping this engine off first, and we'll get it put on the bench. Now, it's not necessary to remove the hood, but I'm going to just for filming purposes. That way you guys can see a little bit better as to what's going on. Okay, hood's off. Let me go and get these choke cables, throttle cables loose. We go and unplug our wiring from last week. Now it's just a matter of the PTO engagement, and then we'll be ready for some engine mount bolts. Probably go ahead and take this PTO off. Take our PTO brake off here. Should be able to slide the clutch off. Now this should be able to slide off. If you guys can see that, we got our drive belt here. Might be enough slack in that tensioner. We can get it off now. Say if not, yeah, there it goes. I was going to say if not, whenever we loosen the motor, the engine plate up, we can fish it off then. Well, guys, I think we're ready for some engine mounting bolts. What'd that take? About 15 minutes of work. We're ready to pull the engine. There's really not too much to these. Well, we are ready to try to free this thing from its home. Now, luckily, Onan must have known that their engines were going to have problems because they have these very nice eyelets for rigging up chains. See, normally this is where I'd break my back trying to pick this thing up. But with this awesome ceiling hoist, shouldn't be too bad. I tell you guys, this ceiling hoist has been a lifesaver. About where we want it. Boy, this thing is just dirty and grimy. We're going to have to drain the oil out of this too before I forget. Otherwise, we're going to be in for quite the surprise when we pull that sump. Oh, look at that mess. This thing did manage to eat a connecting rod. We should see some evidence of that in the oil. Boy, that is black as night. Yeah, I figured we'd go ahead and start with the back cylinder, the one we know is bad. We'll go ahead and get this tin work out of the way and try to get that head off. That should just slide on off. Pretty sure these are all the same length, so we should be alright. Don't have to worry about keeping them separated. Unfortunately, we have a couple that are hanging up on us. Well, we're getting a little movement out of them. Oh, man. Oh, no, we broke one. Well, that's what I was trying to avoid. I think this other one's not too far behind it. I'm trying to work it, guys, but nope. There goes that one. Oh, man. Well, luckily these broke off with just enough meat hanging out that I can get a nut threaded on. Trying to get a nut threaded on this one, too. There we go. All right, so now I can get my welder out. See if we can't weld these nuts to them studs sticking out, and then we're going to quench it. And hopefully it'll pop loose. Come on, baby. Oh. Oh. I got excited. All right, let's try again. Man. Oh, damn it.
Well, that escalated pretty quickly. So as you saw in the last clip, I was dealing with some broken head bolts, 3 in total. I managed to get the first one drilled out for the most part. I tried easy outs, couldn't get it. I ended up drilling it out so I could retap the hole. Well, me being me, and I'm not an expert, like I've told you guys 100 times. We all make mistakes. I thought the head bolts were 3/8, and they're not. They're 5/16. So I ended up over tapping this hole, so I was gonna have to use a different size bolt. Not a big deal, I'll make it work. So I got this side finished up. When I went to the other side of the engine, I broke 2 off on that side. Started drilling it out, trying easy outs, couldn't get it. And unfortunately, I ended up breaking the drill bit off in the bolt hole. I tried everything to get it out. I tried using a die grinder with a burr bit. I couldn't, I've got no drill bits that could drill through it. So I decided to call it quits on this engine, but not all hope is lost, because I knew I had a parts engine. Now, I had kind of talked about the history of this thing. This was on another 416 broke rod, kind of a similar situation as this one. So I knew for the most part it was kind of together. Now, over the last year or so, I've robbed some parts off of it. I call it the pickup for the ignition coil. It goes on the front of the crankshaft here, and it's what tells the coil to fire. It's got an exciter ring and a pickup, and that's what tells the ignition coil to throw spark. I had robbed this off this engine for another one of my tractors at some point. But besides that, this thing's pretty much complete. So instead of us robbing parts from this one to put on this engine, we're not gonna do the opposite. I've already gone through and stripped off what I need off this engine, and we're gonna get it put on this one. Nobody's perfect, we all make mistakes. I could try to hide it with you guys wouldn't know no different, but that's just not how I am. So, oh, and before we get started on this, when I was tearing this engine apart to get the parts out of it I needed, I did solve our mystery of the missing piston. Well, guys, I just knocked the sump loose on this engine, and I think we found our piston. Man, look at that. How this thing wasn't knocking and beating around. Man, that's crazy. And the odds of this thing disintegrating like this and not breaking the block is crazy to me. These right here are the nuts for the connecting rod, and these were just laying in the bottom of the sump. Now, it is possible that they were tight, and whenever it blew apart, these things just vibrated loose. However, I have seen it before on a Kohler, an 8-horse Kohler. These nuts will sometimes back off and cause the main cap to come off. So that could be a possible cause there. Maybe these loosened up over time, and it finally let the connecting rod to come loose, and bam, it all slammed together. I think I'm gonna go ahead and do the easy stuff first before we dig into the internals. I'm gonna go ahead and get that new pickup and exciter ring put on this engine. This flywheel shouldn't be that tight since I just had this off recently. Pulling these flywheels are about like any small engine. You need some kind of puller to make it work. This is just one I rigged up, but it does seem to work. It's just some flat bar with a hole drilled into it. You use your existing flywheel bolts to hold it on. Oh yeah, that's already loose. We got our exciter ring here. If I remember right, that rides on the key, and that should just push in there. It is labeled. It tells you which side needs to go out towards the flywheel, but if any of you guys have got one of these Onans and you're fighting an intermittent spark issue, if you've already ruled out the normal stuff like safety switches, the next place to look would be this pickup right here. They're notorious for causing intermittent spark loss, especially whenever the tractor's warm. It'll run great when it's cold, but as soon as it gets some heat in it, I don't know why, something about these things will fail. And I suggest finding a used one, because new, if you can even still get them, they're about $200 or $300 last time I checked. The wiring just loops down and around the bolt down here and up through this cush clamp. I'm sure you guys are yelling at me right now for working on a dirty engine. And I would love to clean this thing. But here in the Midwest, in the good old state of Indiana, we got about 8 inches of snow on the ground. So it's kind of tricky for me to get a pressure washer out right now. I have no idea what the torque spec is on this. So I'm just going to do the old German spec, which is good and tight. All right, we are ready to go ahead and get this sump off. This is probably gonna make a little bit of a mess. I tried to drain out as much oil as I could. When I flipped this thing over, I could hear something rattling. Now remember, this is the parts engine I had that had a broke rod, so we're probably gonna see some destruction in here. Oh yeah, there it is. See, like I showed in that last clip, on the other engine, the nuts were completely off, the connecting rod. So this just goes to support my theory that I bet that's what caused that other one to come apart. And it looks like we didn't tear the gasket, which is awesome, because I do not have another one. I'll get you guys in there to show you that crank journal. Ooh. Man, that is not good. I might be able to clean that up, but that has got a lot of aluminum embedded into it. That's sticking off the crank about a 1/16 of an inch. Oh yeah, man, that thing was hammered. I think to play it safe, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this other piston out. Probably actually gonna dingle ball both of these cylinders, so I want to go and pull this one out and assess the damage and make sure it didn't get tore up in the big bang. You know, it almost looks like there's even some aluminum embedded on that nut right there. Got the main cap. That one's kind of boogered up. Doesn't feel terrible. And we got our piston. Well, I'm not too sure what to do about this crank journal. I mean, I know what I want to do, but I don't know if it's going to work or not. I mean, ideally, we'd pull this crank out, take it to a machine shop, and have them polish it, but come on now. We're not doing that here. So what I think I'm going to do, so you guys know what I'm talking about, you can see that built up aluminum on the journal there. I got to figure out somehow how to get that off. Now, I had seen other guys that do a lot of repairs. These engines with aluminum pistons and stuff, they'll actually use some kind of acid that will dissolve the aluminum off the steel. But again, I'm not that fancy. So what I think I'm going to try, I'm going to use some of this Scotch paper here and see if we can't do our own polish job here. It's probably going to take a while, so I'm going to get to work on this and I will bring you guys back with hopefully some good results. Well, I've been working at this for about 15 minutes now with that sandpaper. I got it cleaned up pretty good, but there is a pretty bad trouble spot I want to show you guys real quick. It's got a pretty big gouge right there and one next to it. Now before you yell at me, hear me out. I know that this is not the right way to go about this. There's no way in my right mind I'd ever charge somebody for doing a repair knowing the crankshaft looks like that. But we're doing this for fun. So in the spirit of the channel, I say we throw this thing back together and see what happens. All right, I figured I'd go ahead and deglaze these cylinders while I got all this apart. I'm just going to be using your standard run-of-the-mill dingle ball hone and a little bit of diesel fuel for lube. Now, I've always been told whenever you do this, you want a slow rotation, but you want fast in and out. Don't know if that's true. That's just what I've been told. Let's go and wipe that out and see what that looks like. Oh yeah, that looks really good. If you guys can see them crosshatch marks in there, you don't want them, your crosshatch marks, you don't want them straight up and down, and you don't want them completely flat. You kind of want, I don't know how to explain it, 30-degree angle maybe. We got a good pattern in there. Now this other side, this is the one that had the broke rod, and you can see there's quite a bit of buildup in there, so this one might take a little bit more effort to get it cleaned up. It's getting there. This one's gonna take a few passes. I guess I'll just bring you guys back when I get this one done. Well, it ain't perfect, but it's a far cry better than what it was. I don't feel any ridges, nothing that's catching my fingernail. It's scored up pretty good from that broken piston sitting right here. But I think it'll be all right. Well, since we got the cylinders deglazed, I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning these surfaces on the head. These valves are pretty dirty too, so we'll have to get them cleaned up. Now, I know you guys have heard me talk about these Onans having a possibility of dropping valve seats, and I actually just noticed this when I was cleaning it up. At first I thought maybe this thing had sucked something up through the intake that damaged the valve seat, but I think what that is, I think that's somebody's attempt at putting the valve seat back in. They probably drove it in, pinged around the outer edge to hold it in. That's what that looks like to me. So I'll be curious to see how this thing actually runs. Well, I think we're ready to slam some pistons back in this thing. I've cleaned it up the best I can do for now. I want to get that sump put back on, then I can actually try to clean the outside of the block a little bit better. Now I'm sure they make a specialty piston ring compressor for this. I don't have one, so I've got this thing right here that's notorious for slicing your fingers open and bending piston rings. But I'm feeling lucky, so we're going to give it a whirl. Something to note too on these Onans, unless you guys know something I don't, normally on these you'll see an arrow or some kind of marking letting you know which way's up. I didn't see that on these, so I just went through and put a couple punch marks on the connecting rod on the side that goes to the top so I wouldn't get it backwards. I'm going to throw a little oil in there. Side should be up. Get it started. So you really want it to go with one whack. Anything more than that and you're liable to damage a piston ring. Get it lined up. Oh, we got it. Got a little worried there for a second. Alright, it's just a matter of getting your main cap put back on. Once I get these started, I'm going to turn the engine over so I can actually torque these. Alright, that's all there is to it, guys. I want to go ahead and slam the other piston in and look up the torque value and get them torqued, and I'll bring you guys back when we're ready to put the sump back on. Well, I cleaned this sump up the best I could, not having my pressure washer right now. There was all kinds of metal shavings in the bottom of this thing, as you can imagine. Like I said, I'm hoping the weather's going to break and I can get my pressure washer out and actually give this thing a bath. I got to wash the tractor too because it's filthy. Well, it seems like it's turning over good. I guess I didn't mess nothing up too bad. I say we throw some new head gaskets on here and get the heads put on. Well, about 5 minutes worth of work. We got these all cleaned up, decarbonized. They're not perfect. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on them because this ain't a restoration, let's be honest. This right here is a great expression as to why everybody should try to get a sandblaster at some point. Yes, they're noisy. Yes, they're messy, but proof's in the pudding. Also, I've had a few people in the past ask me about my sandblaster setup. This is just a central pneumatic one, the one you get off the shelf at Harbor Freight. I have done a couple mods to it. I did put a different light on the inside. I put this nice junction box on the outside. So that turns on the light inside the cabinet. And I've also got the dust collector set up with a vacuum. That way when I'm ready to use it, I just flip the switch and I'm good to go. Now the other modification I've done, I converted it to a gravity feed. The way these come new, they're a siphon feed. And anybody who's done research on these know what I'm talking about. They're extremely unpredictable and it's hard to get a consistent amount of flow out of a siphon feed. Now there are several of YouTube videos out there showing you how to do this modification. I've pretty much followed those. With about 30 bucks of parts from the hardware store, I got it set up to a gravity feed. I also added an inline moisture collector as well as one coming off my air compressor. The two main things you need to have a reliable sandblasting setup is clean air and a lot of it. I think most of the hate that this sandblaster gets is from people using too small of a compressor to try to push it. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's going to be extremely frustrating. Now, I'm not saying it's easy to go out and spend $1,000 on a big air compressor, but if you're patient, you can find you a good used one, and that's what I ended up doing. I don't remember the exact specs on this thing. I know it's 7.5 horsepower. It has actually got a 4-cylinder pump on it. The CFM, I don't remember. I'm sorry, I know that's kind of important, but honestly, the bigger the CFM, the better. So hopefully it answers some questions. Hopefully it gives you guys some guidance in the right direction and gets you guys to buy your own setup. Before we go ahead and put these heads on, I am just going to go through and run a tap through these holes. I really just don't want another broken bolt situation. And you can tell how much gunk that pulled out. So anyway, I'm going to tap through all these, get the bolts cleaned up, and we'll be ready to put some heads on. Well, it is time to put these heads on. This is the gasket set I got. I didn't buy it because it was premium. I bought it because it was the cheapest. I'll be sure to put the link for it in the description. It was like, I think 12 bucks on Amazon, free shipping. And these graphite gaskets I've found, they're pretty durable. I did go through, clean the threads up on these, and I put just a little amount of anti-seize on them. And I know a lot of you guys are probably yelling right now, why are you using anti-seize and not Loctite? My theory on it is I would much rather deal with a loose head bolt and a blowed out $5 gasket than to go through the trouble I went through earlier trying to drill the broken bolts off. So all these bolt holes are naked on the backside, so moisture and dirt and stuff can get to the back of them and it just corrodes this steel to this aluminum. So do what you want, do your own research. This is how I'm doing it. I'm going to use the impact just to snug all these down because I don't want to be here all day torquing these. And once we get it snugged down, I'll go through the torque sequence. I believe torque on this is 15 foot-pounds, and there's a certain pattern you're kind of supposed to jump around. So anyway, I'm going to get to it. All right, there we go. Rinse and repeat on the other side, and I will bring you guys back when I'm done. Okay, the next thing we need to get done on this, this is more of a preventative thing, kind of. Part of it is. So anyone who's familiar with these Onans know that they're notorious for the intake manifold. Can't really see it because all the shrouding. It is a two-piece deal that's riveted together from the factory, and what happens is those rivets will vibrate loose, the gasket will blow out, and you'll start sucking air, you'll have an intake leak. You'll start having it backfiring, running like crap. Multiple issues will come with that. Now, as these engines get older, it's good practice. If you start having some issues like that, just bite the bullet, Go ahead and take all the stuff apart. You don't have to pull the engine to do it. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it now because it's easier on the feller's back, so I ain't bending over the tractor. Now the other thing you need to go ahead and do while you got the intake off is check the valves. Now not only is it routine maintenance to check your valve lash, since we did some decarbonization work and some other work to this engine, it's kind of necessary that we recheck the valve lash, and I'll explain real quick why. Now don't mind my crude drawings here, but let me talk you through this. So typically when you're checking valve lash, you're measuring up here on the top side, you're checking the amount of room between the bottom of your rocker arm and the tip of your valve. Now everyone knows as metal gets hot, it tends to expand. When it cools, it contracts. And you want a little bit of lash in there, some giveaway. That way you don't have valves hanging open or valves not opening fully. That's why there's valve lash. I'm not an engineer. I'm not going to go into detail as to why, because it'll just make me look stupid. But in our case, what you need to pay attention to isn't so much that we've done something to change this mechanical difference here. What we've done is over on the other end, the bottom of the valve. So as an engine runs, it burns. You guys saw the signs of carbon buildup on the cylinder head. The valves are no different. Over time, carbon will build up on the valve seat and the valve. Now where that makes a difference at is as carbon builds up, it's actually pulling this valve downwards, which in turn increases this gap right here. So you'll all of a sudden start having loose valves. Typically what you do is you just go through, tighten it up a little bit, and you move on your day. Well, since we went through and we removed all this carbon, this valve technically should be sitting closer to the valve seats, which shortens this distance required up here. So that extra lash that you added in here is no longer needed, meaning you'll go from having tight valves to all of a sudden you're going to have extremely loose valves. Now in the grand scheme of things, we're probably talking about, I wouldn't even call it a thousandth of an inch difference, but on these tight engines like these Onans, that's enough to make them run like crap. I know that from experience. So enough talking, enough lecturing, let's get to work. Well, this is pretty routine stuff here. I'm just gonna rattle some bolts out. What I've found over the years, don't be surprised if you're gonna break some of these screws off. Anything that's holding the shroud together, don't be surprised if you break one. It just goes along with the territory. So we're going to take all these bolts out here and get the shroud work out of the way, and then we'll get access to the intake manifold and the carburetor. These right here are usually the ones that break. Now if this engine's still on your tractor, you're going to have to pull your cylinder head shrouding off. The main shroud that covers the flywheel can stay on, but you will have to pull these side shields off in order to get these loose. Since that's off, they're just going to slip right out of the way. And now we've got access to our exhaust bolts and our intake manifold bolts. Got that out of the way. Over on this side, it's the same brackets that hold your dipstick on. Now, if the engine's still on your tractor, obviously you're going to have to worry about the fuel line. You'll have to unplug that. The other thing is the throttle linkage. They're really not as complicated as they'll look, and I'll show you real quick what I mean. You can either take it off at the carb or take it off out here. I like taking them off out here. But all it is this little bracket. It's got a clasp on it that goes around the rod. Swivel that out of the way, and that allows you to pull your rod. Well, this is a good time as any to go ahead and clean all this crap out of here. These two squares right here, it's your valve covers essentially. All right, let's go and pull these valve covers. There's really not much to these. Something to note, I'm pretty sure that these bolts have actually got, that's a sealing washer, it's copper. That keeps oil from working its way back up. So make sure you don't lose that. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and adjust these valves. Like anything, there's multiple ways to go about it. This is how I do it. You guys make your own decision and figure out what works best for you. I'm going to start with this intake valve right here. The way that I do it, you are going to turn the engine over until you see this lifter stop moving, and that tells you that that valve is completely compressed. You're going to come down to your crankshaft or your flywheel, however you're doing this. You're going to make a mark on the block as a set point, and you're going to note where the crankshaft's at. You can see our keyway is facing almost straight up and down. So now I'm going to turn the engine over one full revolution. And you can see right there, we know that valve should be completely closed and there should be hardly any tension on this. Yeah, just by looking at this already, I can tell this valve is a little too tight. So the spec for the intake valve is 5 thousandths. Unfortunately, I don't have one, but I've got a 4 thou and a 6. So we'll start with the 4 and see what we got. Yeah, that's too tight. And I'm actually going between this adjuster nut and this latch cap. That's what you guys are aiming for. 4 thou does not fit. You tighten it to loosen it, if that makes any sense. So you're going to tighten the adjuster into the lifter, and that will increase the gap. Okay, so 4 thou is now loose. Let's see what 6 does. 6 is actually pretty good. I'm just going to give it one more nudge. I would rather my valves be a little on the loose side than on the tight side. 6 barely fits. 4 is loose, so that should be 5 thou. All right, I'm going to rinse and repeat for the next 3 valves, and I will bring you guys back when we're ready to move on. Well, we're ready to go ahead and put these valve covers back on. I went ahead and just tossed these in the sandblaster and cleaned them up, hit them with some high temp paint. That $12 gasket set also came with valve cover gaskets and some carburetor gaskets as well, so we get to use some new ones here. All right, that is going to cover it for the engine for now. I think we're going to go ahead and switch gears to that carburetor and that intake manifold, and I'll show you what we're going to do there. All right, this is that intake manifold I was telling you guys about. You can follow this seam here and you can see this is a 2-piece deal. All we're going to do for now, we're going to go and take this carb off, and we're going to go through and knock all these little rivets out all the way around this, and it'll split open. Now there's different ways to go about doing this. If you guys go to do this on your own, you'll flip it over and you can see these remnants of the rivets. What I've done in the past, I'll actually take a cutoff wheel or a flap disc and I'll grind those off flat to where I can see the circumference of the top side of the rivet. That way I know for sure that I'm going to drill it out in the right spot. If you start drilling on that, your bit might walk. All right, I kind of got the camera to focus on that. You can just barely make out that circle. So now I'm going to go through and take me a center punch and try to mark dead center of that, and then we'll drill them out. All right, I've got this thing all drilled out, so now it should come apart. It was actually starting to split on me when I was drilling it. There we go. That's all there is to it. I'm going to take these 2 halves here and throw them in my sandblaster. We'll get them cleaned up real good, and we'll see about sticking these back together. Well, we got these cleaned up pretty good from the sandblaster. Something that I do different, if you guys ever go to do this yourself, you'll see a lot of guys say to replace all these rivets from the factory with small machine screws and nuts. So what I do instead of that, I actually use some of these 1/8 inch pop rivets or monobolts, depending on where you're at in the country. And I'll go through and rivet it back together. This is the way I do it. I think it gives it a cleaner look. And yeah, I just wanted to stress that to you guys. Do your own research. As far as the sealant, I've got some ultra black here. I'm sure you could probably use whatever you got, but this is what I use. So I'm just going to go through and put a nice heavy coating of this stuff all the way around. And I will bring you back when we're ready to marry the halves together. Make sure you got a couple clamps at the ready once you slam these together. All right, we're ready to pop some rivets. All right, I got this thing set up on my welding table here. You don't have to use one of these to hold it in place. It's just tricky. You can use a bench vise. That's what I usually do. To buck these rivets, I've got one of these attachments for a cordless drill. It'll actually pull them. If I remember, I'll put the link for this in the description. I've had this thing for years. It is extremely handy. It'll do 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/16, all the common ones. Well, there we have it, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe all this excess silicone off. I'm already making a mess with it. This stuff's like anti-seize, I swear. Anyway, I'm gonna clean this up real good and we'll move on to the next thing. Well, we are chipping away at a pretty good rate on this. We got that intake sealed up. I did some rust removal and some paint work on the tin and the muffler. I want to go ahead and check this carb out, give it a quick cleaning. Now this engine was running. It was running poorly, but that's probably because it was only hitting on one cylinder. But I'm going to go ahead and pull this top half off. We'll look it over real good, clean it up, and you guys have watched me do this about 100 times. So I'll probably just bring you back when I'm done unless I find something exciting. You know, it actually looks pretty clean in there. Well, this carburetor was surprisingly clean. I went ahead and pulled the jets out and cleaned them anyway, but everything looked fine. So let's go ahead and throw this carb back on. I have got a new gasket. And unless you guys know something I don't, it is about impossible to take a carb off one of these without pulling the intake. I've never been able to figure out a way to do it, but all right, after flipping the carburetor around because I put it on backwards, we're ready to put this on. I got some new gaskets laid down. Make sure our wiring's not in the way. Okay, we're ready to put the muffler back on now. I do have a couple new gaskets laid down on the heads. I'm gonna go ahead and use some new bolts. Old ones were kind of rough looking, and I had these on the shelf, so another nice thing about working on these engines. Everything is either 1/4 by 20 or 5/16. No guessing on metric bolts or fine thread. Well, guys, we got this thing back together. I'd say about 95% of the way. The only thing really left to do before we put it back on the tractor is I got to put all this shrouding work back on. It's not a terrible job, but there's a little bit of cussing involved. So instead of having you guys watch me struggle, I'll just bring you back when we're ready to set this back on the tractor. Well, I can't believe it, but I think we're ready to set this engine back on the tractor. Went ahead and got all the wiring chopped up like it did on the other engine. Got new fuel line, new fuel filter put on. Something I didn't show, and I probably should have. These pulse pumps actually run off the crankcase. Behind this shroud here, there's a nipple sticking out the side of the block. It's crucial that that hose is in good shape and not leaking, because if not, your fuel pump ain't gonna work right. Went ahead and threw an oil filter on. I haven't put oil in it yet. And I know if you guys can see that ugly orange, unfortunately it is a Fram. But the way I see it, as much metal that went through this engine, I'm probably gonna change the oil on this thing pretty quick if we get it running. So let's go ahead and get it slung on over here, get it put in its new home. Now I know I've said it about 5 times now, but I'm gonna say it again for the people in the back that didn't hear me. I know this thing is filthy. I know it's dirty. I know the right thing to do would be to wash it, but it's getting colder by the minute and I cannot get my pressure washer out right now. So it's gonna stay dirty for a while, and hopefully it warms up enough I can give it a bath at a later date. Well, we got 2 bolts in, 3, and number 4. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten all these bolts up. We'll go ahead and get all this stuff buttoned back up and get this thing ready to hopefully start. All right, guys, this is it. The moment of truth. I think I got everything wired up right. I did go through and check and just make sure it is cranking over and it does have spark. I guess we're going to start feeding some gas to this thing and see what happens. All right, guys, here we go. Let's see if we get this thing primed up and get to start. The filter's full over here. I doubt you guys can see it. Well, unfortunately, that battery's still junk. I had to put my jump pack on, so let's keep cranking here. Now, I know it's going to take a minute to fill that bowl up, so maybe that's what the issue is, but let's go and give it a little snort here and see if that'll help get it started. Oh, oh, it's trying. We're getting somewhere, guys. What's funny is I have got a dinner with some friends and I'm supposed to be ready in 15 minutes. And I'm out here still dirty trying to get this thing started. So if I can't get it going here in a minute, I'm going to call it quits till tomorrow. Yes! Guys, I'm calling that a success for tonight. I'm so happy to hear that thing run. All right, well, I got about 15 minutes to get ready, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and shut her down for tonight. And hopefully tomorrow we can see if this thing actually does tractor stuff. All right, I'll see you guys later. Well, guys, it's the next day. I did a little bit of work off camera. I went ahead and got the hood put back on. I got the PTO button back up, the air cleaner put on. So I guess we're ready to start this thing up again and I don't know, see if it drives back and forth and see if the deck works. Well, if you guys heard that squealing sound, it was the drive belt slipping on the pulley on the engine. And the reason being, there's a broke spring on the belt tensioner. Okay, well, we're gonna have to fix that before we can try to drive this thing. Well, it's not really a hard repair to fix a broken spring on that tensioner. You just gotta get some stuff out of the way. All right, let's see if we can sneak this side cover off. Oh yeah, there we go. Let me go ahead and pull this step off, give us a little bit more room. Okay. That right there is the spring. Now normally I wouldn't remove this idler, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull it. That way you guys can see what we're working with. It'll just make it that much easier to change. There we go. Okay, there it is. Yeah, what's weird is this tensioner was working when I first got this tractor home, so I must have broke this whenever I was putting the belt back on or something. Something else I wanted to show you guys, I've actually ran into this issue before on another one of my tractors. So where this tensioner rides on this arm, there's a bushing in this frame where this rod goes through to support it. And what happens is there's so much stress that over time it ends up wallering this hole out. I mean, you can hear how noisy that is just by hand. imagine what it sounds like when the tractor's running. So it's not the end of the world if that happens. Normally what I do when I run into that, I'll pull that rod out, and I've got some bushing, steel bushing. All it is some pipe that's the same OD that I need with the same ID, and I'll just inset that in the frame and weld it in place, and it'll give you a lot more life out of it. But for now, I'm not going to do anything about this. It's not terrible. If I had plans on keeping this tractor, restoring it, I would definitely take care of that. But for now, we're going to ignore it. Well, unfortunately, the only spring I got in stock right now is this one. As you can see, it's definitely too long. I was just going to chop it down and make it work, but it's also bigger in diameter, and I was worried it was going to get hung up on this frame. So what I did temporarily to get us going, I just took the end, flared it out, put a new crook on it, and cut it to length. So this should get us going for now. Another little trick you guys can do. This tensioner is pretty noisy. I just went through and curved this dust seal up. I can't take it all the way out because of the way this pulley's designed, but you pull that dust seal up just enough and you can shove some grease in there. And if you're careful, you can push this back down without damaging it, just like you're packing grease in a wheel bearing. Oh, I can't even hear it now. I think it's going to be easier if I go ahead and put this spring back on and then put the pulley on. That way I can just stretch the belt underneath the pulley instead of trying to put this tiny little spring on. Oh, there it is. Woo, okay. All right, I'm going to throw this back together and then we're going to try again. Okay, let's go ahead and start this thing up. I'm going to make sure that rear end works. I'm going to go forward and backwards with it. Unfortunately, this left rear tire is pretty much done for. While it's running, I do want to check and make sure that the hydraulic deck lift works too. Anyway, let's see what happens here. Fired right up. Well, guys, that's probably going to do it for this one. I know there's still a lot of stuff that needs to be done on this thing, but I think this video is going to be plenty long enough for now. So probably won't be the last time you'll see it. I've brought it this far. We've got a very good running engine now. So I think it would definitely be worth the time to try to get the deck working, get this flat tire fixed, go ahead and service the rear end, get the headlights wired up again. You guys saw in that last clip, the belt is slipping for the deck. Now, I did turn the deck over by hand, so I know it's not completely locked up. And I think that'd be a pretty good project, getting this deck pulled off and servicing all the bearings, greasing it, checking the blades out. Because really, the deck's not in that bad a shape. It's got some rust holes in it, but I've seen far worse. So I think we could definitely bring that around and maybe cut some grass with it. So you guys put down in the comments what you think I should do with it. I'm dying to give it a bath. Unfortunately, it's still about -2 degrees outside right now. And as much as I like making some good content for you guys, I'm not going to drag a pressure washer out right now. So yeah, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button too. And I'll see you on the next one.